Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for finding the time and visiting today's webinar. My name is Mark Smith, and I'm the Group Managing Director of P2P in Australia and Frog Recruitment in New Zealand. Before we get started, let me explain how we're going to engage with you during this webinar. If you have any questions, then you can write them in the question box at the right-hand side of your screen. And we will answer them at the end of the presentation by Dr. Edwin Trevor Roberts. Edwin will be asking questions throughout the presentation, so please note the poll tab as well, where you can submit your answer, and we'd love to know your opinion during the presentation. At the end of the webinar, we'll also send you a link of the live recording, which you can share with your wider team. So let's get started. So at this time, we are all in a state of flux, a condition that makes staff engagement, workforce planning and retention extremely challenging. So as leaders, it's necessary more than ever to find a way to motivate and engage our people to achieve business objectives. So to explore this topic today, we will be talking with Dr. Edwin Trevor Roberts, the Chief Executive Officer of Trevor Roberts, which is a specialist career management and talent development company that helps people to find and experience meaningful work. Edwin, over two decades experience in career and leadership development, team development and facilitation as well. And his career journey has seen him work in the UK and Canada and present to a wide range of audiences in Australia and internationally. Edwin's working life has been devoted to understanding the critical intersection between individuals and their work. The deep immersion in research and practice has centred on how the world of work is evolving in response to changes in society, technology and organisations. I personally have known Edwin for many years, and he's partnered with People2People in our Brisbane office on many occasions with Chris McGinty and Ben Wheeler in Brisbane. So in the next 45 minutes, you'll learn why it's critical for leaders to proactively create a sense of us, how the change environment has evolved to what it is today, and the trends that are shaping the nature of work. How leaders can help individuals experience more meaningfulness in their work, and how you can play a pivotal role in helping people create a sense of identity to adapt to constant change. So it's over to you, Edwin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark. And it's lovely to continue the great relationship with People2People, which we've had for a long time, and it's really been fantastic. I'm impressed by the full room that you've got here, and just a big shout out to a number of people that are in the room, which I can't see, but I know you can see me, that I know and that have been involved with our organisation for a long time. So it's lovely to see that juxtaposition come together. So hello to you all. And welcome. Now, today I'm conscious it is the 2 o'clock session, which if you were Mexican, you'd be having a little siesta right now. But the goal is we're going to keep this quite fast paced. The polls and the questions are going to be there to keep you focused on the content. And so I invite you to spend this 45 minutes together with us as a learning opportunity, and really invite you to engage with some of the ideas and, most importantly, how it applies. So I really want you to be slightly schizophrenic, if you don't mind, throughout this presentation. First of all, I want you to think about how this applies to you and to your role as a leader. And secondly, how does it apply to all of your leaders that report to you and the other teams that are around you as well? So think about both as we go through here today. So there's a couple of logistic pieces that we'll go through. Mark's covered off on most of these so far. So yes, everyone is muted. There's chat and questions, there's polls, there's screen sharings. We're going to be going quick through this, and we're certainly going to be enjoying it as we go through. So let's start. And I wanted to just share with you probably my first experience as a leader, and that was when I was at school. I was in cadets at school, and our school was lucky. We had 3 sorts of cadets. There was a really cool Army cadets, there was the awesome Air Force cadets, and then there was the Navy cadets. And of course, because of the influence from my father, who did compulsory military service overseas, I ended up joining the Navy cadets. Now, in an all-boys school, that's a really great way to learn how to get a thick skin. I can assure you, happening through the 1990s, until I got to year 12. And year 12 was brilliant because I became the cadet officer. I was promoted to the highest rank. Now, the fact that I was the only person in year 12 in the Navy cadets, nothing to do with it. But anyway, I got the rank, which meant I got the really cool ice cream suit. You know, think about all those great movies with Tom Cruise in it. Not as good looking, but got that really cool suit with the sword. Awesome. It was really fantastic. And what that experience taught me, taking people on excursion, on camps and survival camps and on long week-long expeditions, what that taught me was fundamentally how not to lead. You see, just because I had the title, just because I had the epaulets, what I was able to do, I was able to convince people to do something, but only for a very short period of time, but not instill long-term behavioural change. And I think this is part of what got me really interested in what does it mean to be a good leader? And what does it mean to actually instill this in others? And so if we have a look here, I'm going to show you this list. Here's a list of what it makes to be a good leader. So just here are some things. So a good leader is someone who empowers people, delegates, communicates, gives clarity, is empathetic, builds a team, brings out the best in people, leads by examples, authentic, creates an inspiring vision, establishes shared values, manages change, takes risks but doesn't take too many risks, is confident, has respect, enthusiastic, and energizes people. Well, if you're not tired like I am, it's a pretty exhausting list. There is a lot. There is a lot that we expect from leaders, and we read shopping lists like this and sort of become overwhelmed as to where do we start? And now this is a number. Last year, we went out to a whole bunch of executives and said, "What does it mean for you to be a good leader?" And I want to share a couple of quotes that came from that. So here's a few quotes from what executives told us. They said that it's about seeing us and her team as being all in together. It's about making decisions. It's about acknowledging the progress, success, and hard work, being more visible. It's about not consulting when your mind's already made up. I like that one. It's about not wasting time. It's about trusting decisions. So there's a lot here that correlates with the slide before. And so it is in time, the reason I wanted to share this with you, because it's in times like this when we're experiencing the uncertainty. And the irony is that before COVID even happened, we were already in a massive state of uncertainty, a massive state of flux in our society. And this has just highlighted that more so than ever. So during these times when things are uncertain, this is when our leadership really comes to the fore. So I want to apply this to you and to what you're seeing in your organization. So this is the first time to get into the chat function. So I'd like you all to go across the chat function, and here is my question for you. I'd like you to throw in there an answer to what challenges are your leaders grappling the most with at the moment? What challenges are your leaders grappling the most with at the moment? Just choose one. I'm sure there's a lot more, but just go with one for now. So let's see what we come up with. So we've got a whole range coming through. There's the rapid changes, bottom line, revenue, digitization, definitely that revenue line. Stepping out of your comfort zone, doing things differently. I like that. That's so true. Uncertainty about the future, making decisions quickly, yes. And also ethically, what's the ethical? The motivation there in terms of that, surrounding themselves with the people, the uncertainty of what tomorrow brings. Big question around time. And keeping people focused and engaged on those business priorities as things going off. Yeah, turning off. I love it. We're working too hard. Indeed. Where does the line? Okay, they're fantastic. So there's some real themes coming in there that people are challenging with, and I imagine seeing those. We're going to cover off on quite a number of those. I'll certainly show some tips of what there is. And today, while we will apply this to the current situation with the pandemic, the things I want to share with you today are about leading in uncertainty across different times, across different epochs, not just for 2020. I hope some of these ideas stand the test of time as we move forward. So really appreciate your chats there. So let's move into the content a little bit. I want you to all think about, can you all remember your very first mobile phone? Do you all remember that? Okay, now there was two sorts of people. You're either a Nokia person or an Ericsson person. So go on, type in. Were you a Nokia person or an Ericsson person? I want to see what happens here. And oh my God. Yes, an Ericsson one. Woo! Nokia. Yeah, you see, Nokia just, 3310. That's very specific. Well done, Mark. That's awesome. Yeah, see, about 90% of people was Nokia. I was an Ericsson person. I had that flip phone. Remember that flip phone? That was just brilliant. Motorola. Yeah, God, I haven't had that for a while. And I remember when I upgraded my Ericsson and it went from 1 row of green text to 3 rows of green text. You know, that was just awesome. So if you all think back to your Nokia all the way, I'm sorry, I'm going to challenge you on that one. So do you remember your first phone? Do you remember these? Let's have a look at this next slide. Do you remember these? Yeah, back then there were 18 different emojis. That was it. And do you remember how much it cost to send an emoji? I still use these. Thanks, Heidi. Do you remember how much it cost? It used to cost about 40 cents. 40 cents to send an emoji, right? And so you'd share your emotions very, very carefully because, geez, they were expensive. Okay? Geez, it was expensive. So what's it like today? Let's have a look at today. Look at this list. Okay? And that was about 2 months ago. In fact, there's more emojis than ever. So, in fact, I think now you can turn your own face into an emoji, which I couldn't think of anything worse. But anyway, apparently you can. So why I'm sharing this with you a little bit lighthearted, but there is far more going on now than there was back then. And we as leaders are trying to grapple with all of these. And what I want to share with you here is just touch into the different forces that are really changing the nature of work. I'm only going to do this for a few minutes. And why I want to do this is I want to share with you that so much of what's going on now is a culmination of an ongoing story. This is a journey we've been on for a while. This is not necessarily new stuff. It's just very, very heightened. Now, last year, there was a plethora of researchers around the future of work and around mega trends that were happening. And it doesn't matter which study you took. There were probably about 6 or so common trends that were happening. And so the one I'm sharing with you here comes out of the Institute for the Future from the University of Phoenix. Now, before I explain, I will mention to you at the end of this presentation, I will be sending you all these resources and you can download this report, including this particular image as well. So no need to take too many notes. It'll come your way for your future reference. And these are the big 6, and these are the big 6 ones that the University of Phoenix identified as the main trends. The first is living longer, the extreme longevity, the green box. The red box is the rise of smart machines. So this is the impact on work with robotics impacting on some of the work that we do. The grey box is the computational world and the increase in sensors that we have just about everywhere, even in sport, looking at the amount of which almost all sports players now have a GPS tracker buried into their clothes that measures their location, but also all their biometrics. The purple box is interesting. I think that'll make a new term for this because it kind of stumped me, this term. It's called super-structured organizations. In other words, looking for different ways in which the value chain can be crafted and created and different ways in which organizations can be structured. And we look at the rise of the gig economy as probably one great example of different mechanisms for organizations doing work and adding value into that value chain. The blue box is new media ecology, getting comfortable doing this. I mean, who would have thought 5 years ago you'd all be comfortable sitting there listening to one person speak, and I would be comfortable staring at that little round dot on there, which I know behind there is a whole bunch of humans. So that's this new media, getting comfortable with this technology. And finally, the yellow or orangey circle is around the globally connected world. So these are all ones that we have seen before in different ways. And what I want to ask you now is we're going to go to the first poll for today. So the first poll asks you whether these which trends are having the biggest impact on your organization and which trends your leaders are struggling with the most. So if you click on the little poll button on there, you'll see poll number 1. And once you've submitted that, we'll also get poll number 2 up very soon. So if you don't mind, if you all just go in there and have an answer of that question. Thank you, that's great. These are all, hopefully coming soon. And I've got, there you go, poll number 1. Poll number 2 is up now as well. So just submit your votes, please. And we'll see what the results are. Now, I have some brilliant people in the background that are doing the co-piloting here, so we should be able to see these results coming along there as well. So just wait for some of those results to, here we go. Okay, so poll number 1, let's have a look. We've got the biggest impact on your organization. We've got 33% for the rise of smart machines, followed closely by 20% on different forms of organizational structure, which is interesting, and then scattered out across the rest as well pretty evenly, except living longer is not having as much impact as we thought. So again, I think that very much also depends on your industry there. So that's interesting for question 1. And for question 2, in terms of which ones are having the biggest impact for your leaders, we've got pretty much a third the impact of the smart machines. How do we tango with the technology, not rage against the robots, for the rows of machines, and for the dealing with those different ways of structuring organizations? And boy, that's going to come to the fore post this COVID experience, as well, as we may or may not go back to the traditional form of an office. So thank you for answering that. What I'm interested in, though, is, with all of this in mind, what are the things you think your leaders are going to need to deal with all of these changes? So the next question here, and I'd like you to throw this into the chat function, please. What competencies do you think your leaders are going to need to deal with these trends? So think about your leaders and what competencies are they going to need to deal with all of these trends. So throw that into the chat function if you don't mind, please. Let's see what we've got. You can all see them there. This is publicly visible. Strategic thinking, adaptability. Yeah, great. Yeah, humor, love it. Yes. Yes, trust, yes. Curiosity, adaptability, brilliant. Overcoming ego, oh, that's a challenge, isn't it? EI, like it. Open mind. Challenging conversations, yes. Great comment, Isis. Flexibility, brilliant. Okay, they're really, really great to see those come through. Now, if we had to categorize those just from what's come through, you know what really stands out for me in those is that about, I'd say 95% of those are what we would traditionally have called soft skills. So these are the human skills, which we're now calling them, those skills that are more related to how we deal with people, we adapt and be flexible. It's those things that we're working on, rather than the technical skills, which are those hard skills. And by the way, whoever named hard and soft skills, they really got it round the wrong way, because frankly, soft skills are a lot harder to learn than the hard skills. But what's really interesting, and I challenge you to think about this, think about your budget that you spend on training and development inside your organization. How much of it is spent on the hard skills versus how much of it is spent on the soft skills? Now, that deafening silence that I hear is probably that you're spending far more on the technical skills than you are on the soft skills. And it's really interesting, isn't it, when these are the skills that we need moving forward. So park that in mind, a potential outcome for you from today's presentation. And just to round off. Now, it gives me really hard for you to see this. I acknowledge this is really small, and so have a look at the report. Have a read of this when it comes out to you afterwards. This particular study then said, with all those 6 trends in mind, what are the 10 skills we need? Now, you know what's interesting? This was a 2020 report. This said, what skills do we need by the year 2020? And I brought this one back up to show you, because with all the current stuff that's going on, isn't it interesting that some of these are exactly what we need right now? I'm going to read out a few of them to you. Number 1, virtual collaboration. Number 2, new media literacy. 3, novel and adaptive thinking. 4, social intelligence. So what was predicted in this research has really seemed to come to the fore, that these are some of the skills that we need. And frankly, I don't think we're fully there yet. I'm yet to see that we've spent enough time and enough energy on the development of these particular skill sets. And another reason I wanted to share this with you is that when we're going through all of this change at the moment, often leaders are getting swamped by what's going on. Your role as a leader is to help others find a way in which they can use this opportunity to learn, to develop, to use this experience they're going through to develop their own skills, to realize that this is a learning opportunity. And even having a little framework like this that you could show them and say, hey, in the midst of all of this chaos that we've got going, what skills have you been developing by now leading a remote team, by rolling out a new telephone system in 3 days, not 3 months? And they will start to see that actually we're learning a lot from this. And this is probably one of the great challenges that we have in the uncertainty that we're living in. And this is a chronic thing that we're experiencing. We have far more uncertainty now than we ever have had, and it's not going to go away. I first started studying uncertainty back in 2002, and little did I know that, almost 15, 20 years later, it's even more relevant now than ever. There's uncertainty at the individual level. Well, how do I make sense of all the stuff that's going on? Where do I want to go? What's my role? What's my work? To the big question of what's my purpose here in life? There's uncertainty at the organization level. Will I even survive? Those people that thought that working for a big company name was the way to have a secure job, that's really being challenged when we look at what's happening in some of the big companies struggling at the moment. And there's also uncertainty at the societal level. How do we manage through all of this uncertainty and what's going to go on? So for us, learning to deal with the uncertainty, to find our way through the ambiguity is critical. And as leaders, and this is a really interesting little piece, as leaders, there was actually a Nobel Prize won for uncertainty. Back in 1963, Syatt and March started writing a paper about the behavioral theory of the firm, which ultimately led to Tony Coates actually Herbert Simon winning a Nobel Prize for his behavioral theory of the firm. And what it said in that, there's lots of stuff in there, but the really interesting thing for leaders is that he said the role of the CEO is to buffer the organization from all of the uncertainty that's out there. In other words, to make sense of all of that and then to weave a compelling narrative for the future. That's what he said the role of the CEO is. Now, we've moved on a few decades, and I'd say that's the role of all leaders, to be able to do that. Our job is to be able to try and find what are these markers that we can use to try and make sense of this future. So what I want to share with you here today is I want to share with you 3 areas that we can focus on as leaders to try and help people through this uncertainty. First of all, how do we help people find a sense of meaning, which answers this big question, what is my contribution? It's also about how do we build a strong connection? In other words, who are my people? Or as the young ones say today, who are my peeps? And the third question is about adaptability. And we saw lots of comments just before in the chat function about that. And that's about how do I adapt to constant change? So these are the 3 topics that I want to explore with you now. And for each of them, I want to give you 1 or 2 really practical activities, tasks, ideas that you can implement with your team with your organization. So let's go on and talk about meaning. One of the most harrowing reads as a book that you can read is a book by a guy called Viktor Frankl. Now, Viktor Frankl was probably the most unlucky man in the world. In the start of World War II, on the first day, he went into a concentration camp. You see, Viktor was a psychiatrist, a Jewish psychiatrist. And on the last day of World War II, he actually walked out. He spent the whole time, 6 years, in the concentration camp. And in a twist of irony, what Viktor Frankl's research interest was how humans deal with trauma, how they respond to it. And here he found himself in a lived experience of a concentration camp. And what kept him going was this wanting to stand in front of a lectern and share with people, kind of like we're doing here today, about his ideas and his research. That's what kept him going. Now, at 83 pages long, it's a pretty powerful read. But You actually don't need to read the whole book. You just need to know the title of his book. And his title of this book is Man's Search for Meaning, with the subtext is his primary purpose in life. Man's search for meaning is his primary purpose in life. You see, what he realized was that this search for meaning in what's going on, with all of this uncertainty that's going on, is what drives us. It's a core part of what it is to be human. It's a core aspect of who it is to be us. And this early work then sparked a whole series of work around meaning and purpose, ultimately culminating in what we now commonly call the positive psychology movement, which is looking at what does it mean to have meaning? What does it mean to have a purposeful life? What does it mean to have a flourishing life? And probably the most well-known is a guy called Martin Seligman, and he wrote a book, and one of his concepts, he talks about the difference between a pleasant life and a meaningful life. Now, this picture you can see there, this was in the days when we used to be able to take holidays. I don't know if you remember when you used to be able to go on holidays. You actually leave your house, you could leave your suburb, and you could go down. Well, this is the Australian Alps. In fact, this is about 3 kilometres from Mount Kosciuszko at Thredbo. And we went mountain biking as a family there, which was just absolutely, absolutely brilliant. You catch a ski lift up and then you don't have to pedal for 10 kilometres and come down. We had a great time, I was just desperately trying to keep up with my 13-year-old son, which was a losing cause. And what Seligman talks about is the difference between these two. About 2 years ago, I did a 100-kilometre bike race on a mountain bike. Now, I'd never in my life done 100 kilometres on a mountain bike. And I thought, how hard could it be? Because it was on a rail trail. Now, for those of you who know what a rail trail is, they've ripped out all the old sleepers and everything, and they've turned it into horses, bikes, walkers to go along. And the best thing about a rail trail is that it only goes at 9 degrees, because that's the highest that a train could go, which was, and I thought, it'd be easy, rail trail, fine. First 50 kilometres, not a problem. Absolutely nailed it. Out for about 2 hours, fine. Got myself a muffin, a Gatorade, fixed a puncture in my wheel, got back on the bike, 52 kilometres, came around the corner and hit the Black Butte Ranges. Yes, that's the name of them. And there it was, 20 kilometres at 9 degrees uphill, unrelenting. It stayed at 9 degrees. I've just never had such sore legs in my life. And it was an hour, I was 45 minutes into this just going, why am I doing this? And then I realized, Edwin, practice what you preach. And I got to the end, and you know what? That was the least pleasant hour of my life, but one of the most meaningful, because I did it. I never thought I could do it. In fact, I was so exhausted from that, I actually burst into tears spontaneously at the end of it. It was so meaningful to get to that. And this is the concept that Seligman talks about as a difference between these. And so when we look for our work, we kind of expect our work to be pleasant all the time. There's something that we seem to want our work to be, that really positive happiness all the time. But if you really want to crash course in learning fast, become a leader. Because there are days when you're dealing with stuff that you never thought you'd have to deal with. And it's tough. But it's when you look back and you've had that challenging conversation with someone, you thought, yeah, I've really got that conversation, and look how they've turned the corner. You look back and go, that wasn't a pleasant conversation, but boy, it was meaningful. I think I really made a difference through that there. So that's one of the things when it comes to these differences. So what I would like you to do is I'd like you to think about a time in your career when you've been at your best. Just think for a minute. And whatever best means to you, it could be that you were, contributing, you were working well, whatever it might be. So just think about it. Where were you? Who were you working for? What were you doing? Okay, so just hold that in your mind. Because what I want to share with you now is I want to share with you a little bit step further about this meaning. You see, so far when I've been talking about meaning, you're probably sitting there going, sounds interesting, Edwin, but it's very, very abstract, right? We've been quite esoteric in our concept. So what I want to try and do is make this as tangible for you as possible, and tangible so that you can help others find meaning in what they do. So we've done something kind of ironic with meaning, and we've done a little formula for it. And we're experimenting with this. So I want to hear your opinion and see what this says. Now, as with any of this thing, listen very carefully, because there's going to be a poll question at the end once I've explained it. So do listen as we go along. Okay, so what is meaning? Now, back to those early days that I learned in cadets, what I learned was that to motivate people, a stick and a carrot methodology only works for so long. But researchers since about the 1970s knew this. And for the last 40 years, they've been researching what motivates people. And they've coined the term, which we now commonly know as intrinsic motivation. And to motivate people from the inside out, there are three aspects to that. The first of these is autonomy. When you give people the freedom to do something, they become motivated. There's nothing worse than a micromanager. We've all had one of those. There's nothing worse than that. But when you give people that space and autonomy to do it, they grasp it and they become motivated. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect of this is competence. When we have the ability and the opportunity to use our skills, God, that's a really, really good feeling. You know, when you're doing a spreadsheet and you do a really complex formula and you get to the end and it balances and you just go, yes, that's it. That's it. Now, not all of you understand how wonderful a feeling that is, but it is a wonderful feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. So, but it's when you can use your skills. It's the same when you don't have it, when you have a skill and you can't use it. It's quite demotivating. You know, when you sit there at an organization and go, God, I've got these skills. I really want to be able to use it. And you can't use it. And you go, oh, I'm a bit flat from that. Now, let me take that one step further. What do we typically talk about in our career development conversations with people? You say, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Oh, I'm not really sure. Okay, well, I don't know. How about you go away and think about that a bit more? Well, do you want to do some learning? Yeah, okay, I'll go on this training and development course. Okay, off you go. And we as a leader often go, yep, we've done our bit. We've motivated them. We're sending them on some training. So they go away and they get trained. Then they come back from something and they're excited. They've got new competence in this. So often, people don't then get the opportunity to use that competence. They don't get that opportunity. And when they don't, they become demotivated. And we wonder why we've trained people and then they've left. And then we think the training is a waste of time. It's not the training. It's the application that's the problem. So that's the second one there. Now, the third one here is around connectedness. We're motivated when we feel part of something, part of doing something together. I mean, even all of us coming here together, there's a big number of us people in the room here. And even though it's a bit virtual and you can't see each other, we're all part of this connection to people in some way. And that's really lovely. And it's even more powerful when it's a small group or when we feel this connectedness. So all of this, if I had to be fancy and wax some parentheses around this gives us job satisfaction, right? So this gives us that motivation and that satisfaction in doing our particular job. I think there's another level to it though. And that is, if we do this with a sense of service towards others, then perhaps we experience meaningful work. Now, what does service mean? Now, service can take very many different levels. So, for example, it could be in service to others. You might be fortunate to be in a role or an occupation or a profession where your service is quite visible. For example, in aged care, you're serving older people, for example. It's quite an obvious kind of service there. Or it might be you could have a sense of service to yourself. Now, let me explain that. We work because we have certain values, and when our values are met, we get motivated by that and we feel good because our sense of social justice or our sense of achievement, these values of ours are met. So therefore, we're having this sense of service to ourselves, not in an egotistical way, but in an ongoing developmental way. So this is some of the examples of what service could mean. But there's one more level. With this current world of work in which we're living in, if we do all that and we don't keep adapting to what's going on, then it just won't keep going. And this is where I think a fulfilling career might come in, if we can keep shifting and adapting as we go. So I'm going to put the next poll up now. Thank you to my trusty co-pilot, Remy, in the background, who's doing all the magic. And I want you to think about the question I asked you a couple of minutes ago about the time when you were at your best. Can you please apply this formula to that time and answer the question, how much do you think this fits? How much do you think this fits? Have a go at it. Wow, you guys are really fast. You're definitely awake and not sleeping. I appreciate that. Okay. Great. So we're hovering about almost 100% of people in the first two applications. But what's interesting is probably to think about, well, where did it not quite fit? What was missing for you? What were those elements that weren't there? And so when you're having conversations with your team about meaning, you can ask them about, do you have a sense of autonomy in what you do? How's the competence? How's your feeling of connectedness with others? Now, you're not going to use those words. That's a bit stilted and potentially a little bit theoretical in what I just said, but use your own words. Have conversations about those areas. That allows you to try and dig out what is that sense of meaning that people are driving from their work. And what I would like to do now is I want to delve into that third bit, which is the connectedness piece, because I just think this is one of the most important parts. And it's not surprising to me that the first series of webinars and resources that came out within nanoseconds of everyone being told they had to work from home was that you're going to be socially isolated, that you're going to need to connect in some way. And the reason that all those resources and that topic came out more was because our wanting to connect with others is so important for us. In fact, it's deeply ingrained with us. So what we have, you see, is this deep physiological need to belong, to be part of something. Now, I've put up our family portrait here to show you a little bit. So you might chuckle at the family portrait, but in absolute seriousness, you see, I was born in South Africa, and I think I was 3 months old when we emigrated to Bathurst, just west of Sydney in Australia. And I spent some time back in South Africa. But anyway, when I was young, I asked my mother, I said, "Mum, where did I come from?" You know that question as a parent you just never want to ask, but it always does. Well, I got it. Now, my mum didn't use the normal stork analogy. She said, "Well, Edwin, I went out into the veld, which is into the bush." She said, "And I got a baboon and I shaved the baboon. That's where you came from." And lo and behold, I actually believed this for years, right? I believed this for years. And even to this day, we had her 80th birthday on the weekend, and I had a bit of a chuckle with her because to this day I said, "Mum, what the hell did you shave me with? Because I cannot do Movember, right? I have no facial hair." I don't know what she used. But the reason I share this with you is because we have this desire to want to belong. So does anybody know why, this is rhetorical because you can't answer, but I want to explain to you why chimpanzees have a head that's that size, right? So I'm going to draw on this slide, right? There's the chimpanzee. Oh, that did not work. Hang on. Okay, so there's a chimpanzee. It's got a pretty small head, right? Now, the reason they have a head that size is to do with a number of relationships with others that they can track. Okay, so at the moment, this guy, girl, I don't know, this chimpanzee is monitoring the relationship to this one, and to this one, and over to that one, and to this one over there, and over to that one, right? And also monitoring the relationship between this one and this one, and this one and this one, and this one is et cetera, et cetera. So some person once told me that is a formula of something like n to the power of n minus, it's just a big number, right? Okay, it's a big number. So in the chat function, tell me, what do you think is the maximum number of relationships of other chimpanzees one chimpanzee can deal with? What do you think? Throw a number in. Be wild. What do you think? Give me a guess. Stab in the dark. Okay, 5 plus or minus 2, 50, 20, 50. Wow. Okay. No one's got it yet. I could be quite sadistic and say we're going to stay here until someone wrote 1. It's probably right. No, okay. Let's stop there. Okay. The actual number is, and I'll write it down here. No one's got it. It might come in 500. Holy dooly. No. 15. It's actually 15. Okay. That's the maximum number of other monkeys that it can manage. And do you know what happens when they get to the 16th? You know what happens to the monkey's head? It just explodes, right? It just completely disintegrates. And that's why monkeys stay in a family of 15. They stay quite small. Now, what about us humans? If 15 for a monkey, chat in for me. Is the monkey an introvert or an extrovert? Love it, Heidi. Love it. I have no idea, but that's a good question. Okay, human, what have we got? We've got 100. Okay, what else have we got? 7 going backwards. Okay, Asha's got it. Asha's got it. Sorry, it's been had. It's 150. It's 150. Well done. It's 150. Now why that's interesting is that we physiologically have an innate desire and need to want to belong, to want to be part of something. So take how Screw Turner used this to build Flight Centre. I know they're at trouble at the moment, but that's because no one can travel, but very successful business. He used this anthropological model to build his business. He had 15 people, employees in one shop, put 10 shops together into one region, 150 people, then spun that off and started again. And that's how he used it. And so why I share this with you is that we need to belong and we need to help people to belong. How do we as leaders create this sense of we and us? How do we create this unique sense of who we are, this sense of togetherness, especially when we're dealing with this virtual world that we're living in? And one of the big challenges is this. One of the big challenges is we're now living in this incredible boundaryless world, right? This world where previously belonging was easy, because belonging was the company that we worked for. Belonging was the fact that our organization would create for us this space. But all of us here in this room are going to work for more than one organization. Most of us are going to work across a different geographical area, different country, and many of us are going to work across different occupations. So how do we build that tribe, if you like, that sense of connectedness when the edges are blurred and the edges are quite disconnected from us? And so the challenge for us as leaders is how do we create that group that people want to belong to? What are those little things that you do that helps people feel like they belong? What do you give them when they join your organization? At the moment, how are you bringing everybody together? And I've seen some amazingly great stories of different things that people are doing. And one of the things that we're doing in our organization is for my team, at 3 o'clock every day for 15 minutes, we have a social catch up. We have a time we all jump on the computer and we have a video hookup where we're just talking stuff, no work. We're just talking, we're just being together and usually having a good laugh, and usually at my expense. So there's no shortage of jokes there to share around that. So how do we keep these connections strong? So this is tip number 1. What are those mechanisms that you're putting in place right now to create this special sense of we and this special sense of us? And it's going to be unique to each of you, The next little thing I want to talk in terms of creating this sense of connection is this notion of people who report to you about job crafting, right? And that is, there was a fascinating study done a little while ago with nurse cleaners in the hospital, and they went around to two groups, and they asked this one group, what do you think the purpose of being a cleaner is? And they said that our purpose is to make sure that the hospital is as free from infection as we can. And as a result, that group did a really good job because they had metrics on cleanliness and infection rates. So that was a really good job. They asked another group then, what does being a hospital cleaner mean to you? And they said, our role here is to make the doctors and the nurses' lives better so we can get a better patient outcomes. Oh, and by the way, we make sure we're clear from infections as well. And that group, they had great outcomes. So this different view about what their work was interesting because they then followed the cleaners and they looked at what they did. And they found out that those that were in that great category, that second category, did their work differently. Those people went out of their way to spend more time with the doctors, to spend more time with the patients, to interact more with others. And this is where this notion of job crafting comes from. You see, we get meaning in the work from doing the work itself, but we get meaning at work. We get meaning from those relational boundaries, from those connections. And this relationship can come not from necessarily our peers or our colleagues. It can also come from our clients, from our suppliers, from whoever it might be. Our cleaner at our building here has been our cleaner for 15 years. I just saw him this morning when I went down to grab a pizza for lunchtime and said hello to him. And, he's almost part of the family. And I love seeing him. He's a great guy and we always have a good laugh. So for me, that's meaningful. It's a great relationship that's there. So I share this. So when you're speaking with your leaders, how can you encourage others to be able to spend more time with those people where they get meaning from. And I guarantee you, when you ask them, you'll find that they're already doing it. They're automatically already doing this. So here comes the time now where I'm going to jump to the third topic here for today, and that is around adaptability. So how do we create a sense of adaptability for us? And I think the Australian Workplace and Workforce Productivity Agency said this brilliantly a few years ago, and you can read the quote that's just there. And I think that's a great definition. I think it's a great definition for what we need in our respective lives individually, and certainly at work. But here comes a rub. One of the things that keeps us from adapting is in fact our history, is in fact our training, is in fact the experiences that we've had. You see, every time we go and do something, it grooves us into a certain way of thinking. It puts the blinkers on for us, so we start to think in a certain way. Now, that might be okay, but most of us don't look up out of that, look around like a meerkat and say, is this still serving us or not? And if not, then what else do we need to do differently? How do we start to need to think differently about? And in particular, our profession is the one that has grooved us to think in a certain way. And you can see it because just about every profession now has that magical 3-letter acronym, continuous professional development. Now, rest assured, I'm a big fan of continuous professional development. It is critical. It's important. Don't not do it. But be aware that what it does do is it grooves you to think in a certain way, to encourage you to keep thinking in that way. And that's one of those things that stops us from adapting, is this history that we've had. So that's the bad news. The good news is that we can adapt. We absolutely can adapt. And neuroscience has shown us the myriad of different ways in which our brain builds new neural pathways to be able to adapt to our situation. The only thing is we need to be willing to change, and we need to put in the effort. We need to be willing, and we need to put in the effort. And when you look at how much change we've managed to do over the last 5 weeks, I've heard some incredible stories of call centres being implemented in 1 week, not 3 months, of whole new different ways of working implemented in days that would have taken, a change management team a long, long time. So definitely it's important that we realise that we can change and adapt very, 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 very quickly. So what I wanted to share with you, I don't want to go into the neuroscience right now. We can leave that for another webinar. But what I want to share with you is, in terms of adaptability, I think what we're going through at the moment is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn from it. So here's a couple of tactics that you can use to help yourself and to help your leaders learn about and learn from the experiences that they're currently facing. Now, first of all about this, the leadership development around the world, they're spending about $350 billion a year on leadership development. It's a phenomenal number. And yet we're still finding that there are leaders that aren't great. There's always some interesting there. And it's not the answer, but part of that answer is people have to be receptive to the learning. So what we've experienced over the last month is no one's really receptive to learning because they've just been struggling to survive with all the changes. But as we come out of it, now is the point to start to say, maybe this is a learning experience. And here are the 3 steps. You can start to have conversations with your leaders about thinking about the approach. It's warming them up to the idea of, let's actually learn from this. So maybe in your next team meeting, you can say, hey, in a future team meeting, let's start to think about what we've learned from this and what it means for us moving forward. The next, and it's about getting into that mindset of curiosity. I think that's the best learning methodology, is curiosity, being curious about what's happened. How did that work? Why did that work? Why did that not work? And the next one is about action, about actually going out and having the conversations and trying new things. For example, it might be that we're learning about how do we have productivity conversations with our staff at the moment when they're in a remote workforce. Well, maybe we need to try some different mechanisms, some different ways. Now's the time to try that. And finally, it's reflection. And I think this is one of the greatest leaders. The greatest leaders I've seen are those that build reflexivity as a habit, not just something they do every now and then. It is something that's that's built into the very fabric of their being. And you can do it in many different ways. For me, when I used to go to the office every day, on the drive home, there's a 10-kilometre windy road through the mountains. And this is the time where I put the windows down, turn the music up or turn the music off, and just reflect on what happened during the day. For me, that works extremely well. Here are 2 other practical tools for you to take away from today. The first, and you can guess from this image, is the 10-minute writing exercise. Now, I'm not sure, some of you may have done this, others may not, but this is a beautiful activity. It involves, old school, a pencil and some paper. You get your phone, put it on Do Not Disturb, and start the timer for 10 minutes. Then you get your pen onto the paper and start writing. And the trick is it's continuous writing. Do not lift your pencil up for 10 minutes. If you don't know what to write, just write blah, 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 blah. Now, when you start that activity with a question in your mind, thinking something like, what did I learn this week about leadership? Or what did I learn from that webinar I attended today? And you just start writing. It is incredible, once you get past the blah, blah, blah stage, how much your subconscious comes out to the fore. I've looked back over some of those writings over the ones I've done just this year. I try and do it about once a month or so, and it's incredible what you learn from that. It's an incredibly good practice. So I encourage you to try it at least once from today, please. And the second tool that I want to give to you here is a little thing we built called the experience set learning. So in other words, what can you learn from a particular experience that you have had? Now, experience set are like Lego bricks. These are the things that we construct our career out of. And this one, the PDF, is available for you on download from the link we'll send you at the end. This gives you some questions to guide through, and you might want to use this with some of your leaders. It asks questions, and as you see from this, on the left-hand side, it's about content. So what have I learned? And on the right-hand side, it's about connections. Now, if you're cluey here, you'll see the link towards job crafting. One is about content, one's about relationship. The first level is quite at a higher level. It's quite sort of, pragmatic, if you like. The next one gets into a bit more depth. For example, how has this experience changed the way I relate with others? And then the final question is the one that brings it all together. How has this experience influenced my values, beliefs, or the way that I think about myself? So please, I encourage you to try this either with yourself or with your team as you go forward from today as one of the practical things. So we're right at the end here of our webinar today. And of course, I've just finished talking about reflexivity. So you absolutely know what I'm going to ask you to do now, aren't you? And that is, I'd like you to be a little bit reflexive of today. So the questions I have for you here is, number 1, what is your main takeaway from today's webinar? And 2, what is one thing you're going to try differently? So in the spirit of sharing together as a group, as a little tribe that we have here, I now invite you, I'll just give you 30 seconds or so to answer those questions and type that into the chat function, if you don't mind, please. Really, thank you. That's fantastic comments coming through, and really appreciate you sharing that in this virtual setting as well. That takes courage, and often something we don't get the opportunity to do with everybody, which is really fantastic. And so I'll conclude here before I hand over to Mark. I just want to conclude with a little comment about what it is to be a leader. And I think fundamentally for leadership, it's not about what you do that matters. It's about who you are when you're doing what you do that does. You see, so often we ask people, you know, who has made the greatest contribution in your career? And often they'll go back and they'll think about a leader that made a real difference to them. And my hope in sharing some of these ideas here today with you is that the next time that somebody gets asked who made the greatest difference in your career, I truly hope that person was you. So I thank you for joining me today, and it's been plenty of fun. So thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Mark. Thank you.
Great, fantastic, Edwin. That was sensational, and I hope just looking at the chat here that everyone did get a few takeaways from today's presentation. We have a couple of minutes for questions. I noticed that we did have one question here for you, Edwin, where it says that many understand and can drive change. The biggest differentiator is the pace required to achieve the transformation. And what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any comments on that at all?
Yeah, look, I think that's a great question. And by the way, I'm going to ask Remy to put up the link to all the resources as well. Thanks, co-pilot Remy. So in answer to that question, Mark, I'm going to answer with a bit of irony. I think it's in the midst of all of this, we need to find the way or the ability for us to take out a pause moment so we can just stop, be still, and reflect on what's going on. I think reflexivity in the midst of the rapid change is more important than ever. And it doesn't have to be a ridiculous amount of time, just 10 minutes a day to pause and reflect on what's happening. So when we come to making the decisions, we're making those decisions from a place of thought, not from a place of reactiveness.
All right, I am conscious of time, so it is 3 minutes to 3 here in Sydney. I know that we've got people in the country and in New Zealand online. So once again, thank you very much, Edwin, for your time today. It's been fabulous. We will be sharing a recording or a link to this to the presentation for all those who attended today. So if you missed something, I'm sure you'll be able to catch up once you get that. If you are interested in the webinar series, we also have our next session on the 14th of May with Kim Sealing-Smith, and that is on how to ride the waves of disruption. So watch out for that, and please register for that. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm active on Twitter. We have a hashtag P2P Insights if you'd like to engage on Twitter as well. So thanks again, everyone, for attending, and hope to see you again shortly on the People to People webinar series. Ta.
Thank you all.